Hey everyone, History Mystery Man with you again, this time from one of my all-time favorite towns, Sylvania, Ohio. It's where I grew many of my roots. I absolutely love it here. I'm on Main Street, so much personality, character, and charm down here. Some of the buildings going all the way back to 1887, and each one telling a really cool, interesting story. You can be assured of that, and I hope to cover a lot of those stories. Now, Main Street is fascinating to me because it only goes for 2 blocks, and that's part of the personality and charm. It just leaves you yearning for more, but 2 blocks is all you get. It's not just the personality, character, and charm that's part of Sylvania, Ohio. It's the off-the-charts interesting history that's part of this place we call small town America. How about when on February 5th, 1930, notorious and brutal bank robber Pretty Boy Floyd got a shave and a haircut at Pop Green's barber shop and then marched across the street, met his henchmen there, and robbed the corner bank. It's Key Bank now. Back then it was the Farmers and Merchants Bank. But he robbed that bank. The building is still there. Same building that Pretty Boy Floyd robbed in 1930. You'll get a look at it there. Yep, that's where Pretty Boy Floyd robbed the bank here so many years ago. But that really pales in comparison to what happened right here on the more northern edge of what's now a hardware store. When on February 4th, 1857, a tailor by trade, a local tailor, struck his wife over the head with a flat iron and killed her. And what happened then and thereafter will absolutely make your skin crawl. Meet Ohio's first serial killer. Return Jonathan Meigs Ward. Too corny on the weird, creepy sci-fi music? I don't know, I'm still figuring all this stuff out. I'm on Main Street at the northern edge of the hardware store near Monroe Street. I'm gonna march in about 20 paces, 20 feet or so, and I'm gonna turn, and I'm gonna show you right where the wooden frame home of Return Jonathan Meigs Ward was, about 16 by 20. Fascinating story, and I wanna tell the complete story, sort of start from the beginning and establish some timelines. We're even going to talk to the author of the fascinating book who lives here in Sylvania. In fact, I'd like to take a passage right from the book, if I could, in the murderer's own words during his confession during the trial, when he said, quote, "She told me plainly that she did not intend to stay with me, but should return to Adrian in a few days. The declaration aroused all the vile passions of my nature. From that moment that she uttered it, I was fully resolved that she should never leave my house alive." Now, to get the complete picture, you really need to have to go back to the beginning to really truly understand Return Jonathan Meigs Ward. That said, this would be a good time to meet the author. This house is gorgeous. Sylvania Heritage Museum, downtown Sylvania. And also, quite fortunately, the author, one of my favorite authors, hangs out here too, Kay Gindy. She's the author of Murder in Sylvania, as told in 1857. All I want to know is, how on earth did you even stumble over this story? Where did it come from?
Just many years of research, I stumbled over it. I guess I was going through a Toledo Blade when I was doing Underground Railroad information. I was looking at old Toledo Blades, and I stumbled across a little snippet about the murder, and I said, what murder in Sylvania? Got my hands on everything I could.
Do you think there's anything to, I know that this guy, this murderer, Return Jonathan Meigs Ward, he had a difficult childhood. You know, his mother died when he was 2. His father, who had 5 kids, for some reason put him out to the wolves when he was 8 or 9. Now that's going to cause wiring possibly to go bad in someone's brain during those formative years. Do you think that had anything to do with the creepy guy he became?
Absolutely, absolutely. The people that he ended up with, the families that he ended up with, treated him terribly. It was just a terrible childhood, and he was always in search of his father, always in search of his father. Could never find him, and then finally found him, and then he found his father, and he ends up putting him back out with somebody else.
Yeah, and
So
yeah, that's I don't want to blame the murder and the person he became on that, but when you take in the life of returned Jonathan Meigs Ward, I think you have to take that into account, don't you? His horrible upbringing and childhood.
absolutely.
That would mess me up for sure. I don't know if it'd make me want to go chop someone up, but and I can't walk by that site or drive by that place without thinking about it. Do you find yourself doing that, thinking about it when you're walking by and like
Always.
this happened here?
I see a woman in a store and I say to myself, that right there is Olive Ward. That's what she looked right there. I mean, there's always things that are coming up that make me think about that murder and make me think about him or her or how terrible it was.
I just can't. I still can't get over the fact that it happened here. The whole timeline thing hit her over the head with a flat iron early Wednesday morning, February 4th, 1857. Spends the day disassembling her. Goes out on the street to find out what the scuttlebutt is. Pretty soon, he learns that he's a suspect in the disappearance of Olive. And I mean, the whole story is fascinating. I mean, it's like it could be a major motion picture.
Definitely. It would be a great major motion picture.
Yeah.
But he spent the entire day and night and several days disposing of her, and he honestly thought he was going to get away with it. He honestly did, as most murderers do.
Coming up on the northwest corner of Maplewood and Main Street, local Sylvania residents would know this place as the new brewery coming to town inside the Five. But back when Return Ward lived in Sylvania with his wife Olive, there was a hotel on this very site where they lived for about 2 weeks right after they got married. Of course, the hotel is long gone, but it was right here. It actually burned down in 1915, but it was here that Olive Davis and Return Ward shared the first 2 weeks of their marriage. So in the late fall of 1856, Return Ward marries Olive Davis of Adrian, Michigan. They only courted for like 2 or 3 days. They soon settle in here in the Sylvania, Ohio area, and it's not before long that Olive realizes she has made a huge mistake. She knows she's living with an abusive man. She knows she's got to get the heck out. So much so that she sends her 2 little children, a boy 8 and a girl 3, off to live with relatives and friends. Meanwhile, she starts commuting home to Adrian, Michigan. One day, Return Ward comes home to their home here in Sylvania and realizes her trunk and all her belongings, her clothes, are gone. So he hightails it down to the nearby train station and finds her trunk there and confiscates the trunk. Soon Olive comes to the station to get on a train. She's so desperate, she gets on the train without her trunk, just the clothes on her back. He even swiped the bonnet off her head before she left. Now, eventually, Return Ward travels to Adrian, Michigan in an effort to bring Olive home. He's unsuccessful. She says she doesn't want to live with him. He comes home. He then hires some guy to go up and get her with the knowledge that he will pay for her train ride to come home. He'll pay all the expenses. She agrees to come home on January 31st, 1857, which would be her fatal mistake. She meets Return Ward at the train station here in Sylvania. They go back to his home on Division Street, Main Street. It was Division Street back then. He soon learns that she's there just to gather up her stuff and get the heck out. He can't deal with it. He's going crazy in his mind. On February 3rd, Tuesday night, they have a big argument. They both go to bed very angry. He awakens at 6 o'clock Wednesday morning, February 4th. He starts the fire, heats the home. She begins to awaken, and just before 7 o'clock, as she stoops down to put on her shoes, he realizes this is his opportunity. He sneaks up behind her and winds up with a big flat iron and strikes her in the head. Olive dies in just about 15 minutes. On February 4th, 1857, right after Return Ward murdered his wife, Olive, he immediately began to engage his brain as to how he was going to hide her body, cover up the evidence. We know that morning a boy came to the door and delivered him some milk. Shortly thereafter, Ward walked next door to Liba Allen's grocery store and for whatever reason purchased a pound of sugar. All the while, his brain's really cranking now. He goes back into the home Wednesday, February 4th. He's got this plan now. He's got it figured out. He's going to to disassemble her body piece by piece and burn it in the stove up the chimney, which he did and spent most of the day and afternoon doing. Sylvania residents began to notice a very foul odor coming from his chimney. And what he didn't burn in the stove that day, Wednesday, he packaged up, including the head of his wife, in a little copper boiler, and he put that under his bed. He chose not to sleep on his bed that night, laid back on a wooden bench in his home, and said he slept very, very soundly. Next day, Thursday, he understands and he hears the scuttlebutt on the street. He knows he's now a suspect in the disappearance of his wife. They don't know she's murdered yet, so he didn't go back home. He came here. Why am I here? Because on this site where Monroe Street dumps into Erie, there was a home here at one time, 7260 Erie. It was the home of his niece, Carolyn Lewis, his sister's daughter, and he slept here Thursday night, took his breakfast here Friday, liked it so well, came back and stayed here Friday night, took his breakfast Saturday morning, and then as he went into the town Saturday, that's when he began to really notice that the scuttlebutt was directed toward him, that he was indeed a suspect in the disappearance of his wife. Came back here, there's a church here now, but this was the side of the home, came back to his niece's home Saturday night, and by then she's saying, dude, you are a suspect in this crime, you're creeping me out, you're not staying here. So now he knows he's in trouble, his brain's really working now. He goes back home, stays in his house Saturday night. He knows there's a search coming on the way, so he knows he's got to button up the scene, button up the crime. He spends all day Sunday taking the rest of her body apart and burning it in the stove up the chimney, hoping to hide all the evidence. Now, the murder was horrible enough, but it's what came afterward that sets this one apart from all the rest. It's so off the charts creepy. He eventually confessed to the crime during the trial, and I want to read his words from the confession in regards to what he did next to Olive Ward. Quote, I went to the bed and dragged out the body to a position near the stove and began to tear off her clothes. Having completely disrobed her, I cut open the abdomen and, taking out the bowels, crowded them into the stove, where I had made an extra fire for the occasion. As they got hot and appeared to fill with wind and explode, making so much noise in their confined situation that I feared the neighbors would hear what was going on and I should be exposed. But by pricking holes in the portions which seemed to be most inflated, I succeeded in obviating this difficulty, and in the course of a couple of hours, the bowels were wholly consumed. I next proceeded in the same way with the lungs, heart, liver, etc. The blood I had bailed out with my hands and put in a kettle, soaking up what I could not otherwise dispose of, by means of her skirts and undergarments, and then burning it all in the stove. And then he went on to describe how he disjointed her legs at the knees, the same with the arms at the elbows, and proceeded to do the work, quoting again, I then covered the boiler over with a cloth and shoved it under the bed. And being exhausted by overexcitement and labor, I threw myself on the work table and slept till morning. Hey, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little creeped out being down here at night next to the Ottawa River, but I wanted to put all the pieces and parts in play that are part of the story of returned Jonathan Meigs Ward, because it was here in the Ottawa River where he deposited some of his wife's larger bones in an effort to cover up the evidence. Now, he may have gone straight down the railroad tracks behind his house, shortest route to the river, and put them there. I like to think he probably trotted downriver a bit so that maybe the evidence would be carried away, but either way, some of the crime was here alongside the Ottawa River on a cold winter's night, much like tonight, and probably did it at night as well, but super, super creepy, but it's part of the story, and I gotta tell you, I'm ready to get out of here. You know, when I cut that piece down by the river, I noticed a giant buck down there, a big deer. That's nothing for down there. There's always a lot of deer down there. I've been walking down there for years, but this giant buck, about 20 yards from where I was, right where the 10 Mile Creek dumps into the Ottawa River, this giant buck, about 20 yards away, walked right across the river. I had never seen that before. I thought to myself, maybe this is where it happened. Coming up from the rear of Return Ward's house, it would have been the back end of the hardware store. Again, about 20 paces in, it would have been somewhere just on the right of the doorway here. And this is where they uncovered a big part of the evidence. There was a wood pile, some wood shavings back here, and some ashes where they discovered part of Olive Ward's jawbone and skull. And the evidence discovered here in the rear of the building helped convict Return Ward back here in the same alley that was there in 1857, the same one they referred to in the trial. He was then arrested and taken to the Lucas County Courthouse in downtown Toledo on February 17th. The trial commenced on March 16th. He was found guilty of murder in the first degree on March 25th, 1857. And on Monday, March 31, Judge Fitch sentenced Return Ward to death. He would be detained in the county jail until the 12th day of June, 1857, and on the date between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., he would be hanged by the neck until he was dead. On the morning of June 12, 1857, a horrendous thunderstorm rocked the streets of downtown Toledo. Ward was led to the gallows shortly before noon. The cap was drawn over his face by the sheriff, and he repeated a prayer from the priest. His last words were, "O my God, I am thine, thou art mine." A newspaper report of what happened at the gallows read like this. As he said these words, and at precisely 5 minutes before 12 o'clock, the bolt was drawn and Ward dropped straight down and hung motionless. Only one slight motion of the feet and all was over. Ward was dead. We immediately left the place, and in the incoherent ravings, the nervous and excited appearance of the murderer on the gallows, the still white form, the slowly swinging body, none of those who were present will ever forget. There's that weird, creepy music again. How'd they know I was going to be alone tonight? Jeez. I guess it was just in the script. Anyway, the real script is here in this book, written by local Sylvania author Gay Gindy. This book is absolutely fascinating. I encourage you to get a copy and read it right away. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. Better yet, just come to the Sylvania Heritage Museum here on Main Street in Sylvania and buy it there. That way they can knock a couple of cents toward upkeep of the museum and to help keep it alive. But what a crazy, creepy story. You know that after the murder was committed, another tailor and his wife moved into Return Ward's house and operated as a tailor for many years. I don't know how they could. The wooden building that Return Ward lived in was there up until 1887, when in April of 87, the entire west side burned to the ground. But local Sylvania resident Albert Randall remembered the building that Return Ward lived in and made an account of it in 1936 when he said, "The next building had been occupied as a tailor shop in which a man murdered his wife and burned her body. We boys used to give this place a wide berth, as we believed her spirit came back and prowled around at night." Do you believe in ghosts? If there ever was one. And I'll tell you what, he's not the only one that when walking by, specifically at night, that gives that area a wide berth. I live about 200 feet away from the crime, and I walk by there a lot, and I'm always thinking about what happened there on the morning and days thereafter in February of 1857. For the History Mystery Man, I'm Don Radeball. I look forward to seeing you next time.